Hello all my JavaScript friends, this is the Virtual Void, aka Mike Smith, and this is Fun with JavaScript, our cache defense game. Okay, so now in this video we're going to take a look at the cache controller. You know, we've already done the game controller, or the game, which is what we're looking at here right now. And we've already also finished up the board controller, so now let's do the cache controller. So again, what is the cache? Before I get to that, I just want to make sure you're aware that you can get all of this code at github.com/FWJS-cache-defense. MIT license, free for you to use, free for you to do anything you want with it. The repository we're working on is main, and in fact, since I usually record these videos after I do some of the work, if you pick it up right now, you might find something in there that we haven't covered yet. So you'll never know what you'll find. Also, you can email me at thevirtualvoid@gmail.com. And finally, you can go to the website to see all of our Fun with JavaScript projects at funwithjavascript.com. And with that being said, with all the advertising out of the way, let's get to the cache controller. So the cache controller is the tower in our tower defense game. And I called it cache because tower defense is actually a trademark or copyrighted word. And so I didn't want to use tower defense. So I used cache defense. And cache is another word for like a cache of objects, a cache of money, things like that. So I'm using the name tower as cache. So the cache controller represents everything that's going to happen with the tower. So what are the things we're going to want to do? Well, the very first thing we're going to want to do, more than we want to do anything else, is we want to be able to create our, what do we want to do? We want to create our test. And that's going to be CacheController.cy.js. And so our description of that will be just very simply describe. I got to spell it right for describe. Cache controller. So again, this will be a general catch-all for all the tests for cache controller. The testing software will group everything that has the word describe with it, will group all the tests within that describe, so it'll make a nice, pretty little output when you take a look at it. So what are the things we want our cache controller to do? Well, luckily they're really kind of simple. Let me put it up on the screen of all the different things we want this cache controller to do. Okay, and here's everything our cache controller we want it to do. Now, I realized just a second ago that I kind of left everything on the directory when I created the file. Sorry about that, but we're back on track now. So, the cache controller, these are the things I want done with the cache controller. And luckily, this is relatively simple. The first thing we want to do is we want to be able to create the cache controller. You know, that's obviously, you know, I want to be able to make sure that everything gets created. I want to be able to start a new cache. So basically, that's kind of like the ability to say, you know, okay, I've created the cache controller. I want to start, and basically almost like start a new game. So I'm going to create a new cache, you know, cache objects, because our controller just controls the operation of the cache. It is not actually the cache itself. So we want to be able to have some sort of routine to be able to create a new cache, basically start a new game, and that's what new cache is all about. Normally these caches are going to have a health value, and the idea here is that when the monsters hit the cache, it decreases the health of the tower, or of the cache. And once it hits 0, everything is all finished up. So the next thing we want to do is we want to be able to adjust the health, adjust it positive or negative. And when that health hits 0 or goes to less than 0, we need to figure out when the game is over. So let's take these one at a time. Let's first of all take a look at the creation part. And whoops, yeah, let's do the creation part. That's the first part. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. Let's pop some code inside of there. Okay, and there's our code. Basically, we're going to check to make sure we have a cache controller, and we're also going to be able to check to make sure we have a health of 0 and the game over to be true. Because obviously, once we start everything, there is no game, so game over is true, and our health is going to be 0. So those are going to be, we now know that we're going to need at least 2 different properties in addition to the cache controller. So if we save that and run our test, we can now take a look at it. But to run our test, we're going to have to actually get everything up and started. So let's go to our command prompt. And let's type in npx x Cypress open. And once that does what it needs to do, It will then go to the Cypress screen. There it is. And welcome to Cypress. And we're going to do E2E testing. So we're going to do E2E testing. It's going to initialize config. Browser, yeah, we're going to do it in Chrome. Of course, we're going to do it in Chrome. Okay, and once we get it done in Chrome, it should now come up to the Cypress test screen. Ta-da! There it is. There's our Cypress test screen. In fact, you can see our test right, where is it? CacheController right there. Kind of hard to see. So let's click on CacheController. We clicked on CacheController. Our tests are running. We should expect errors. We got errors, which basically means that absolutely nothing is working correctly because we don't have any kind of object or anything. So that's our next step. Is that we've got all that done. Let's flip over to our code and let's start writing some code. We're going to need a new CacheController object. So we're going to go into our directory, and underneath controllers, we're going to start a new JavaScript file, and we're going to call that one CacheController. Export default. Whoops, let's actually put the code up on the screen. You can tell there I can't spell. Export default class CacheController. Da-da-da. Constructor. All right, now that we've got that done, we can go back to our test. And we'll click on refresh. And of course, it's still giving errors because although we've created the object, first of all, we forgot to, I always forget this, we forgot to import it. So let's import the object. Let's get it in there. And there it is at the very top, import CacheController. We save that. We go back to our test. And let's refresh. And it worked a little bit better. We now create the object, but everything else blew up because we forgot, we don't have anything to do. We forgot to set all the defaults. So let's go back to our code. What are the defaults we're going to need to set? Well, it looks like we're going to need to have health set to 0 and game over set to false. So let's go over to our board controller. Not board controller. We're not on board. That was the old video. The CacheController. And let's pop some code inside there. Okay, under the magic of television, we have it in there, which basically here's our health and here's our game over. Here's where we're setting to 0 and to true. And because these are private variables, I've got to create getter functions for her health and game over that will allow me to access the private methods. So we save that. We make sure our cache is saved, and then let's go over to our code, and yep, there we go. It works like a champ. So now everything is clear, so let's start working on our other methods. Our first method we're going to take a look at here is the newCache, because basically now we want to be able to, when we create a new cache, that means basically our game is starting at that point. We need to populate it with some health, and we need to basically set a game flag. So let's write the test for that. And through the magic of television, it's all ready to go. So basically, as you can tell here, we are calling newCache with no argument, so that's very good. So basically what we need to do is, looks like we're going to need some, we want to produce some errors here because we want to throw an exception if the argument is not an integer. I'll take that back. I said it had no options. I'm sorry. It does. It's going to take one argument. There's the actual example down there. Let me bring up the bottom part of the screen so you can see it a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so let's see if, can we get the whole thing in there? No, not quite. Okay, so here's basically we're going to have one argument, and that's the starting health. If there is no argument, which let's bring that up on the screen. There it is. If there is no argument, it's going to use the default health. And so that's the first thing we're going to test for, is that we'll create a cache that will have the default health. If we pass in an argument, we got to be absolutely certain that the argument is an integer. So we'll throw an error if the argument is not an integer. And that's the error we're going to throw. We're also going to throw the error if it's less than 1, because we don't want to start with a health of 0 or a health of negative something. That's just stupid. So we got to make sure that health is 1 or greater. So we're going to pass it at 0, and if that's the case, it will kind of throw the error there. Finally, we're going to check to make sure that it does actually set it to the value we set it to. And we should also make sure that when we do set it, that the game over flag is now set to false, which basically means that once we set the cache, that basically starts the new game. So that's really all there is to this particular one here. So if we were to save this and run it, and we go back to our screen, Yep, we got errors all over the place because we have no method called newCache. Let me get that on the screen. Yep, there it is. There it is, right there. We have no, right to the right of what I got highlighted. We have no method called newCache. So what do we do next? Well, we write the code. So let's go and write the code into our CacheController, and I will see you here in just a second. Okay, and through the magic of television, here we are. First of all, we're setting our default health, because if you remember correctly, in our cache control CY, the first thing we check for is to make sure it is a default health. Is that up on the screen? It's not up on the screen. Get that on the screen. There we go. Okay, so we do set the default health. So let's go back to the CacheController. Go back to the top of the screen. And here are our two arguments, our two error conditions, that the argument is not an integer and the argument is less than 1. So when we go to the newCache method, it's going to pass, basically this is an optional argument, so if no argument is passed, I automatically set it to default health. That should satisfy one of our error conditions. If we do pass a number and it is not an integer, then we will yell at you saying, hey, it's not an integer, you stupid. Then we also check to make sure that the health that we've passed is less than 1. If it is, we say, it can't be less than 1, you stupid. Anyway, I won't go into that. And once that is all done, we set the health and we set the game over. Because initially we set the game over. Let me go to the top here. Will that scroll up on the screen correctly? No, okay, go to the top. Yeah, go to the top here. Remember, our initial health was 0. Our initial game over is true. So if we now go down to the bottom, our game over is now false and our health is now the health that we specified. So that should now get CacheController working correctly. Let's bring up our test. Yep, there it is. There it is. Let me bring it up on the screen. There it is, right there. 7 passing test, no failing test. So we're in good shape. So it looks like adjustHealth is going to be our next one. So let's do adjustHealth. So what do we want to do for adjustHealth? Well, it's very simple. adjustHealth, all it's going to do, let me bring it to the bottom of the screen here. adjustHealth, all it's going to do is just basically change the health positive or negative based upon the value that is passed to it. So let's pop some code inside there. Alrighty, through the magic of television, here we are. So basically what we're doing is we're setting an initial health of 5 in this case, and then we're calling the adjustHealth here. First of all, we're going to throw an error if it is not an integer, and of course we'll sit there and give you that error message. We should automatically add 3 to the health. And when we do that, we're going to check to make sure it equals base health plus 3. We should also subtract 3 from the health. And we will also, in that case, subtract 3 and subtract 3 from the base health. So that's really all there is to it. So if we were to run this right now, it's going to scream at us for being bad because adjustHealth has not been created yet. So now of course, we got all these errors now. So let's now go back to our adjustHealth. Let's go into our CacheController and let's throw some code in there to get the test to run correctly. Okay, here we are. Here's first of all our error message, in case the health increment is not an integer. Yeah, it's the exact same error message as up here, but I wanted to make sure it says adjustHealth argument. Why? Because it's my stuff. That's why. So next, let's take a look at the adjustCache routine. So let's scroll to the bottom here. Here's the adjustCache. Again, I'm basically making sure that my health is an integer, and if it's not an integer, I'm throwing yourself a little error, and I am setting the health plus or minus, but I am doing something really interesting here. I'm also trying to determine if the game is over. And this is a private method. I don't want to have anybody have access to this method outside, so I've made this into a private method, which you see here, which basically which is one way, a single way that we can make sure whether the game is over. So eventually, we want to be able, not eventually, I shouldn't say that because that kind of defeats the purpose of TDD. I've got this game over here for a convenient method to be able to determine whether the game is over. And right now I'm saying that, hey, I want you to take the maximum number between this health and 0. So if this health goes to 0 or is less than 0, then health is going to be 0 or less than 0. Actually, it will automatically be set to 0. And if health is set to 0, game over is true. So game over gets set to this health equal 0. So if that ends up, does it equal 0? Yes, so game over is true. If it doesn't equal 0, 0, 0, 0, then game over is false. So this is a convenient method to determine whether game over is true or is false. So anytime health gets adjusted, I will adjust the game over flag. So the last thing that I want to check, well, no, that will solve this particular adjustHealth problem. That will also allow us, I got my words mixed up correctly, that will also allow us at the very end here to be able to know when the game is over. But we'll get to that here in just a second. So we save what we have, make sure everything is saved. We go to our test screen, and it should be all clear. And yep, all clear. We have 10 good tests and no failing tests. That was easy. So how do we know whether the, let's scroll down to the bottom. How do we know whether the game is over with or not? Let's just look at the test for that code. That's going to be a very easy, simple little test. And through the magic of television, there it is. So basically, to be able to test this, we have a base health of 5, and we set there, and we'll create a new cache automatically of 5. And so we're going to make sure, first of all, the game is set to false by adjusting it by -3. So 5 minus 3 is equal to 2. Is 2 greater than 0? Yes, it is. So game over should be false. I should set the game over to true if I sat there and subtract it to where it's 0. So if I'm say adjust health by negative base health, it'd be -5. So 5 minus 5 is what, kids? It's 0. And since our code sits there and says game over, if health is equal to 0, then the game is over. Now I did do, if we look over on the CacheController here, I did do this math.max for the health. So I want to kind of just check and make sure that if the number does go below 0, that still works correctly. So I took the negative of base health and multiplied it by 2, which makes it 10. So 5 minus 10 is -5. So it's still, the health still should be equal to 0. So we check to make sure that the game over is true, but we're also kind of checking to make sure that the health is equal to 0. And in actuality, I'm just sitting here wondering, actually, this part should actually be up here in adjustHealth. And that was kind of weird to be able to put it that way, but hey, that's the way it goes. So yeah, I gotta have to fix that in the main code there. So anyway, I'll get that a little bit later, because it doesn't really matter where it's at, but just for sake of how things look, who cares? Doesn't matter. Anyway, so we got our controller done. We got our cache code done. Technically, I think everything should be okay. Let's just go to our thing. Yeah, we got 13 passing tests and 0 failing tests. So we're in good shape there. Now, what we want to do is we want to test all of our stuff just to be absolutely certain that everything works correctly. So here's our base game item. The base game item still works. Here's our board controller. We worked on the base game item board controller we worked on our last video. Here's our current cache controller, which we just got finished doing. That works great. Here's our game controller, which we worked on from the very beginning. And here's our item position we worked on our last video. Yep, so all of our tests still work. So everything is working like a champ so far. And that pretty much ends it for the cache controller. So now we got all the different things that rudimentary gives us the ability to put our tower on the screen and adjust its health and know when the game is over or not. So our next video, let's go to our game.cyy. Our next video looks like it's going to be, yep, road controller, where we're going to control all the different roads that gets put down on the field. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please click on the like button below. If you wish to keep informed about new content, click on the subscribe button. And as always, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Again, thank you very much for watching. This is the Virtuoid, aka Mike Smith. We'll see you later.